love to invite as a second external keynote speaker today someone who's leading the fintech revolution in Pakistan, who's the co-founder of Finja and is making Pakistan rethink how they relate with payments and money. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Qasif Shahid, the co-founder of Finja. He has more than 25 years of experience in leading commercial and fintech banks right now. Qasif, we are all looking forward to hear your words. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Please.
Saad. I want to start by saying that, Coke is one of the most recognizable brands in the world. And, not the most, but I would argue that perhaps it's the top most recognizable brands in the world. Now that would make Coke one of the greatest marketing and distribution companies in the world. And then one would argue that is it one of the greatest, or is it the greatest marketing and distribution company in the world? Now, I say that because you guys have very successfully navigated 130 years of your existence. Okay, so in these 130 years that you guys have been around, you've navigated many challenges and you've always managed to come on top. You have retooled your business models, you have changed your marketing, you have played with your segments, but you've always navigated all of these challenges and have come out on top. And it's an extreme honor to speak with a team across 11 countries on this Innovation Day for a company which is as great as yours. Now, I've got 3 things that I'm going to talk to you today. Only 3. The first one that I'm going to talk to you is about burning platforms and strategic inflection points. That's the first point. Now, we need to understand the relevance of strategic inflection points and burning platforms for the incumbents and market share leaders like yourselves. They have the most to lose, and they have also the most to gain. That's the first point. The second point that I'm going to speak to you about is about banking platforms and fintechs and how they're eating the world. And the third point is that how the first 2 happenings are going to go out and already creating a background where FMCG supply chains can go out and unlock colossal amounts of new value. So these 3 points are actually interlinked with each other and very relevant to the audience. So with that, let's go on to the first point, which is, the burning platform. So burning platforms, by the way, is actually a real event that happened in 1988 in the North Sea. And this is one of the largest offshore tragedies that the world has seen. 167 people died here because of an explosion that happened on this offshore rig. And the point is that most of the guys on the rig locked themselves in a basement bunker thinking that they'd be rescued. But 3 of them decided against it and came on the surface of the rig, out of which 2 decided to jump into these icy, freezing waters and didn't want to stay on the rig. Now, they didn't want to stay on the rig, not because they were sure that they would live if they jumped, but they were certain that if they stay, they'd be roasted and baked. So they jumped. And jumping was an irreversible act, and they made that act. They got seriously injured, but they were rescued. And guess what? These were the only 2 people that got saved. The man that stayed on the rig got burned, and the guys in the bunker were not rescued because help didn't come in time. Now, it's through this event that the phrase came out, which is called burning platforms. So burning platforms is a situation where you are in a hard place and a rock, and you have to change through pain. What it means is that if you stay in the place that you are, the only certainty is that you would perish. But if you go out and lean into the change It's an irreversible process, and there are no guarantees that you're going to survive. But because the odds are changed and staying in one place means sure death, suddenly change becomes more invitable and more manageable. And this is really what's called a burning platform. Now, COVID is the ultimate burning platform. It's like the black swan that we have lived through. And it's not just COVID, but at the heels of COVID, there are other burning platforms that we are living through. And one of them is obviously the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. And around that, there are other conflicts that are coming in. The other one would be global innovation. And then the inflation that various countries are experiencing. The way the VCs are looking at new age companies, and the way money is drying up. These are all what's happening to fossil fuel prices. These are all examples of burning platforms. And these burning platforms then spur organizations into change. The other day I was in Karachi, and there was a conference going on, and I had the privilege to hear your finance director, Erdi. And he kept saying 3 times in the conference, he said, it's either about digital transformation or liquidation. Why was he saying that? He was creating a burning platform within the Coke structures in Pakistan. The Nokia CEO in 2013, in those very difficult times when they decided that they're going to go and join Microsoft and merge with Microsoft, then also created this analogy of a burning platform. And he said that, we've lost the battle. The Apple guys are running away with the smartphone opportunity. And if we stay at the place we are, which is Nokia, we are on a burning platform, we would perish. And therefore, we need to go out and make a partnership. So these are burning platforms. Now, the burning platforms are almost always followed up with what are called strategic inflection points. And strategic inflection points is another term that we need to understand. It's coined by this great guy called Andy Grove, who was the CEO of Intel in the 90s. And he saw Intel through many, many troubled times, and Intel came out ahead just like Coke. And what Andy says is that, in these times of great change, which comes through burning platforms, one of the things that we need to understand is that whatever was perceived as value ceases to be that value. Whatever the customers perceived as value before these times of change, as you go through these massive changes, that ceases to be the value that customers start to consider as real value. And we need to understand that. For example, if you take COVID, and if you're a small Italian restaurant and you do great pizzas, which are steaming hot and people love it, you got to go out and create user experiences where users don't have to leave wherever they are. To the value that you are providing completely changes. For example, when iTunes and Apple went out and created iPods and iTunes, the way people were experiencing music completely changed. And that was the new value. So as these new values arrive, what happens is that new technologies come to the play. And it's through the combination of these new pieces of the puzzle, if I were to tell you, it's through those that the new upstart players start to come in. And when these new players come in, they question the value chain completely, and nothing is sacred for them. And they put the customer value in the center, and they start to create a brand new value proposition for the customer. And it's through that void that these upstarts start to grow very quickly and disrupt the incumbents. That has happened time and again. And if you were to take an example, Tesla would be a great example, right? So Tesla, as it comes in, questions everything about the automotive industry. For example, it questions the fact that the automobile is about going from point A to B. Instead, Tesla is a internet mobility platform. It questions the fact that why does a automobile industry needs distributors and why can't it go to customers directly? So there are no distributors in Tesla. It questions the fact that why would you have to go to a gas station to fill your car? So they have a very different mechanism of loading power into the car. It questions the fact that why is it that you have to go, to a repair workshop to repair your place. So when Tesla comes in from underneath, it's questioning all the points of the value chain that then created the previous value. And this is a very, very dangerous play. If the incumbents don't get to anticipate the burning platforms and the strategic inflection points that follow, because they have so much positive inertia, they're already winning, they're already the market share leaders. If they are slow to anticipate these happenings, which are eventually going to change the playing rules, which is the regulations, which are the engagement models, the partnerships, the distribution play, then they lose very quickly. Obviously, Coke has seen these cycles before, and you've navigated these cycles brilliantly. But today, we are right in the center of this storm, which started with COVID, but so many other burning platforms are coming in, and through that, strategic inflection points are upon us. Now, with this, I would move to my second point. Can we go back? Yeah, okay, so then the next one. Yeah. So let's just take a very quick journey through what has happened in the technology life cycle for the last 30 or 40 years. And each of these circles, the decades that I show you, are decades where massive value was unlocked on the supply side or on the demand side. In the 60s, technology came into the business enterprise for the first time in any meaningful way. And what it started to do was it started to digitize isolated functions in an enterprise. So what you had was payroll digitization, supply chain digitization, sales digitization, etc. And when these things happened, these were strategic inflection points, and a lot of incumbents lost their way, and it created an opportunity for upstarts to claim the market share, leveraging these breaks in technology. Now, the 70s saw these isolated functions start to come together. So if you had a payroll, it was combined with the sales performance vertical, and incentives could have been calculated digitally. Again, a period where massive value was unlocked in the 70s through technology in the business enterprise. Now, the 80s and 90s is the time when, for the first time, we started to hear things like the CRM and ERPs and so on. So what it did was that it started to bring together the isolated functions in the enterprise which were already digitized. And as you started to bring these things together, you started to view the 360-degree view of the customer, the view of the employee, the view of your partners and their performance, etc. Again, a time of massive value unlock and massive gains in customer experience. Again, these are the times when a lot of incumbents lost their way because they were unable to anticipate these changes. And of course, we know the 2000s brought a brand new play. In the 2000s, the already digitized enterprise, which has a 360-degree view, now started to connect with other enterprises. And the examples would be online commerce, where you would go to a partner's website and go and place an order that will fall in their ERP directly. And again, online commerce is a time when a lot of incumbents, gained ground, but a lot of incumbents also lost their way. And now when you come to the present day is a time when ecosystems are connecting together. And the technology from one enterprise is being embedded into another enterprise. And this is, again, a massive time for change. So what I'm trying to say here is that every time there is a paradigm shift in the way tech happens, every time, uh, it's a time for massive dislocation, and the incumbents have the most to lose and gain. Please move to the next chart. So, with this, I'm going to go to my second point, and because of the first point, which is that we're navigating our way through burning platforms, and coupled with strategic inflection points, what's happening is that banking and fintech are under a lot of pressure to evolve and come together and change the world. So to some, it may seem that the banks are fighting for their survival, but that's not really what's going on. What's happening is that the banks, if they approach these burning platforms and strategic inflection points correctly, are about to become much bigger in size, much bigger than what they are today. And they're going to do that by coming in and partnering with fintechs and banks. When the banks are going to morph into platforms, they're going to partner with fintechs, and with that, they're going to become much bigger. Why? Number one, today, half the world is still unbanked. And number two, 90% of the SMEs in the world are either underbanked or unbanked. In emerging markets, 98% of SMEs are underbanked. SMEs are about 90% of the economy in any country. So, take the example of Uber. Many years ago, when Uber started to test their business models, they did a market size for Northern California, and they said, well, so many cab rides happen in Northern California, and we're going to have 50% of those. 2-3 years later, they discovered that the pie of taxi rides have grown exponentially, because what they did to taxi rides was that they changed the customer experience completely. They changed the demand, they changed the supply, and suddenly so many people that never thought of taking taxi rides were now taking taxi rides. They expanded the pie exponentially. The same thing is about to happen in banking. The banking pie is going to exponentially grow, and it's going to have direct impact on the supply chain businesses that we are going to come to the end of this piece. Now, let me explain. What's happening in banking and finance today has already happened previously in the technology space. You see, in the year 2000 to 2005, if somebody asked you to name a technology company, you would say Intel or Google or IBM or a company like that. And the view at that time, a very considered view, was that technology is a vertical, and it's an isolated vertical, and it wasn't really connected in any meaningful way to the other industries like health, medicine, finance, entertainment, and so on. But within the next 5 or 7 years, something very strange happened that has completely changed the world. Technology, from being a vertical, changed itself into a horizontal. And as it changed itself to a horizontal, it started to go out and take its place as a center stage in all enterprises, on all businesses. Today, all businesses, all enterprises, all companies in all industries are fundamentally technology companies. At their ground level, at their design level, they are tech companies. At their user experience level, they are tech companies. So technology has made a transition from being a vertically integrated industry to a horizontal industry, which starts to now live across all enterprises. And that has really changed the world in the last 20 years. Actually, that's the single most important factor that has changed the world: technology moving from a vertical to a horizontal. Now, guess what? What's the dynamic that has happened in technology is exactly the same dynamic that is today unfolding in banking. Banking, by the way, is one of the last isolated standing verticals today, which is now being changed into a horizontal. How so? First of all, we need to understand banking is protected through regulators, and then through licenses, and then within the banks, not just the entire bank, but within the bank, there are many isolated verticals. So banking in that sense is very much like an automobile type industry where the banks are going out and doing research to what products they want to develop, then they manufacture those products, then they go out and create user experiences for those products, then they go distribute those products themselves, then they go service those products, and they do it in vertically siloed organizations several times within the single bank. So it's as fractured as they can be. But now this last vertical is being shifting into a horizontal. What does that mean? What I'm telling you is that, within the next few years, all enterprises, whether they are new age or old age, all SMEs of all sizes and shapes, pretty much are going to convert into fintechs. And just like how previously all companies became into tech companies at the core, now all companies are going to become fintechs at their core. Now, how would that happen? This would happen at the back of these three principles, which are called banking as a service, which is BaaS, banking as a platform, which is BAP, and then open banking. So, banking as a service means that a licensed entity can go out and put out their APIs, and other non-financial companies can actually consume those APIs and start to offer banking services within their own apps and their own portals. Banking as a platform means that non-financial companies can come on top of the banks and offer their services to the banking customers. And open banking means that customer actually is the owner of the data that they have, their transactional data, payment data, lending data, other demographic data, and it's on their discretion that data would move through disparate organizations connected through the ecosystem. It's the combination of these three forces which is going to force banking from a vertical to a horizontal. So what I'm trying to tell you is that we are living in an age where banking is about to become invisible. It's going to become invisible at the back of a concept, what we call embedded finance or contextual finance. What that means is that customers are going to consume banking services, whether it's credit or whether it's payments or whatever else type of services they are, staying into the apps and the platforms of their non-financial entities. And when that happens, that non-financial entity becomes a fintech. So what I'm trying to say is this, that if you are an SME today anywhere in the world, there are very powerful assets that you have. You have the relationship of your customers, you have data about them, you have insights about them. Either you are selling goods to them or you are buying goods from them. And because you're living in a post-COVID world, you are running as fast as you can to create digital portals and mobile apps in which your customers and suppliers are engaging with you. Now, at the place where these interactions are happening between your customers and suppliers, imagine if you could offer them credit without having to alter their journeys. Imagine if you could offer them payments without having to alter their journeys while they're staying into your apps. When that happens, colossal value unlock is going to happen. And that's what's forcing the banks from becoming horizontal, from vertical to horizontal. And when that happens, the banking pie is going to grow exponentially. Now, Amazon is already going out and giving lending to various actors in their supply chain. Spotify is going out and financing various elements of their supply chain. There's a company called Affirm, which has partnered with a bank in the US and is a classic example of buy now, pay later for these exercise bikes called Palladian, which has really changed everything. In Pakistan, Finja and HBL have partnered together, where any time when a retailer wants finance, actually the money is coming in from our banking partner. These are all examples of how the fintechs are going in and starting to use banks as a service to then go out and create these user experiences in non-financial entities. So if you examine this very carefully, you would understand that the fintechs and the banks are actually sitting on the same side of the table. The banks have licenses, banks have deep pockets, banks have trust, banks have capital. But the fintechs have very different strengths. The fintechs can go out and create innovative products very quickly. They can reform and transform those products, and they can go out and create phenomenal user experiences, but in very targeted and limited segments. But when you bring both these elements together, what you have is a fintech as a conduit in the front, and banking services and rails and capital at the back, and together this becomes the bridge between the rest of the economy and the banks. And it's through that this new revolution is transforming. So this brings me to the last point of the presentation, right? Which is that how do we go out and link these two developments to actually what you guys do, which is obviously the FMCG supply chains, right? So on one side, we've got these burning platforms and strategic inflection points. They are forcing the banks and the fintechs to come together, move from a vertical to a horizontal, and then go out and in time, very quickly, make all enterprises of all types and sizes into fintechs where these services are consumed. Now, as all of these changes happen, what implications will it have on the FMCG supply chains across the world? So, there are two main things that jump on us. The first is the opportunity to introduce credit at various parts of the supply chain. And the second is to be able to remove cash from various aspects of the supply chain. So a classic FMCG supply chain will have suppliers, it will have manufacturers, it will have distributors, it will have retailers, and it will have customers. And if you see the slide, there are multiple opportunities to introduce credit at various aspects of this supply chain. I mean, what we do at Finja is that we introduce credit at the retailer level. So when the distributor is dropping goods to the retailer, whether it's Coke bottles or Unilever or whoever else, the retailer then has the option to either pay digitally or pay through credit. And when that happens, there is a massive value unlock. Finja has been doing this for 2 years. We've had over $50 million of financing that we've done in this space in 45 cities, 40,000 retailers. And now we know through our partners and our own analysis that every time we provide credit, the sale of those retailers go up by 30%. And that is a phenomenal value unlock. And what our partners are telling us now is that if Finja credit is taken into lots and lots of stores, that becomes the fastest way to go out and optimize the existing capacity that these supply chains have today. So what I'm saying is that if there is a certain level of tonnage that comes in the vehicles that are distributing these goods, if the vehicles are running 12-hour shifts, by going out and creating credit in the long tail, which are these small stores, you could go out and you can really optimize capacity in your existing supply chains. Now, what credit does for the retailers versus the distributors, the credit does the same thing for distributors versus the manufacturers, because when the distributors want to go out and buy supplies from the manufacturers, if they have ready credit, they could go out and buy more. And the same story would repeat itself there. Now, and then it goes down to the suppliers. So the suppliers, when they're supplying supplies to the manufacturers, for example, Coke or Unilever or whoever else, in a lot of markets for up to 90 days, invoices are discounted immediately and they get paid. It introduces a new level of efficiency and stability in the system. Now, this is just credit, but imagine, in Pakistan, I'm showing you here that there is actually $500 billion of value that moves in from the supplier to the manufacturer, to the distributor, and then the retailer, and eventually the consumer, because the money is changing hands. So the opportunity is not only to introduce credit at various points, but the opportunity is to remove cash completely from the supply chain. And if you remove cash and you introduce credit, you have sort of unlocked massive value in the supply chain. Now, how would this happen? The last slide. This is happening at the back of what we've already talked about, which is embedded finance. So what's happening is that, when the distributors or the manufacturers have apps, and when these apps are with the retailers, and when the retailers are going to go out and order from these apps, they would have embedded finance plugged right into those apps and portals, where the retailers and the distributors will have the option to go out and make digital payments and avail digital credit. That would happen through a fintech. The fintech would go out and orchestrate these experiences with companies like yourselves, but at the back of the fintechs would be these banks with their rails and with their low-cost capital. So in closing, what I'm trying to say is that, we've arrived at an opportunity which is fueled by these burning platforms and strategic inflection points, where banking is becoming invisible, which really means that we have an opportunity now to completely retool the existing supply chains and get rid of cash and introduce credit to them. And once we do that, we've unlocked value which was unthinkable before. Now, as an incumbent that's ruled the world for 100 years, you got to be the first ones to come in and leverage this to become even bigger and stronger. But like I said before, if you are slow, or any incumbent that's slow to use these forces to retool their supply chains, then they have most to lose. And in closing, I got to say that, what Erdi is saying is spot on. Either you go out and digitize your supply chains and get rid of cash and introduce credit and transform yourselves, or you are on a burning platform, which means liquidation. So, but you guys have a track record and you've navigated challenges like these before. So, smart money would be on you. Thank you.
Qasif, I am overwhelmed right now with your presentation, and you could have seen me right here. I was absorbed. There is so much to learn. So first of all, on behalf of the people who are here and of the 11 countries who are watching us right now, let's give another big round of applause to Qasif for a wonderful...
Thank you. Thank you.
And all of you can join in virtually, raise your hands, wherever you are, if you liked something. Qasif, we are this whole theory about burning platforms and inflection points, Now, it's a very interesting place to be, because sometimes you get caught up. Eventually, these inflection points have to happen, and value has to be seen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when those points happen, right? So sometimes, as newer organizations, as SMEs, you get burnt in trying to be amongst the first few to take that and invest your energies, and when the ecosystem hasn't been developed enough to absorb you, or waiting behind and letting the ecosystem to be developed enough for you to take action. So how do you solve that little equation there?
Yeah, look, that's a great question. I turn this around a little bit, and I would say that it's not that hard for the small companies to anticipate, changes, and it's okay for them to be wrong, because their acts are reversible. But the real challenge is for incumbents like Coke, or any incumbent in any industry who's the market share leader. Because when you're leading the market and you're the king, then you are so invested in the present that, these changes are in your back view. And you think that they're going to cannibalize your existing business, or you think that the opportunity is too small for you to go after. And you keep doing what you're doing, and that's when you leave the space open for these upstarts to come in. And these upstarts take advantage of these burning platforms, and suddenly they create a brand new proposition which a segment of the market thinks is real value. And what you are delivering in the old world ceases to be that value, and the incumbents are one of the last players to actually see that. And that's the challenge of the leadership in a company like Coke, because some of your senior leaders have to be wedded to the fact that as these low probability events start to take shape, how are they going to go out and wrestle with them in one corner and not be the last ones to figure that out? And obviously, I mean, Coke has done this time and again, otherwise it would not be here. But I mean, the road is littered with large players that have lost their way. And as at the pace of these changes exist, more and more of these tragedies happen. I mean, I mentioned Nokia. I mean, Nokia lost their way because they didn't see, the smartphones coming in, and they completely bungled. So that's the challenge. If you're a small player, if you're early to an opportunity, you can cut your losses and go back very quickly, right? And if you're late, you can start running very quickly and catch up. But the real tragedy happens, when you're a big guy.
And when you don't see it for a certain period of time.
Big guys find it very, very difficult to see it. This is one company that's been seeing it.
Well, we're talking about it here, all of us, so I'm sure that there is some thought which is going on, and a lot of interaction has already started. Now, let me take it from a very technological perspective to a guy on the road kind of a perspective, right? I come from a very humble sales background where I would go on trucks, routes, and I have done hundreds of routes on the road and sold things, right, from beverage to fertilizer. Now, one of the dreams of a salesperson is the ability to give away credit. I mean, we would always work with the companies we would work with wouldn't allow us to do that. And there were other companies in the market who would be throwing credit. And the philosophy was that you don't want to expose yourself to something you don't have control over. Why do you want to be in a space where your sleep is going to be sacrificed? Now, here comes a third player, which is actually taking that little thing out of the equation from somebody like Coke or somebody like who sells fertilizer or oil or whatever it is, and says that, okay, we are going to touch base with your retailers, distributors, dealers, and we are going to manage the credit bit. So that kinds of makes the space very even, right? So whose sleep is at stake then?
Yeah, great question. Great question. The first thing is that it's a very special type of credit that we are talking about here, right? Because always remember that when you give cash to a business or to an individual, it's fungible. You have no idea what they're going to do with that cash, right? You can't guarantee that they're going to go and invest that cash in business. But in supply chains, what happens is that you can actually tie credit to the supplies that the user is buying, right? So first of all, I mean, companies like Finja, when they partner with supply chain players like Coke, would never go out and give cash. So we only go out and give credit. The credit is to buy supplies, right? Now, anytime when a distributor in the market comes up and they start to offer credit to their retailers, let's say. Now, all things given, the distributor that is not offering credit is at a serious disadvantage. Because I would then, let's say if I were to buy tea, right, and all things constant, and one distributor is giving me tea on credit, and the other one is giving me on cash, I'm going to go and buy tea on credit because the cash that I have, I can go and use it for other things, right? So it opens up my options. So in a market where credit is going to become the norm, whoever will start to offer credit first, for that duration where they are the only ones offering credit, they would have an advantage. They would have an unfair playing field. I don't want to say this, but if Coke and Pepsi, bad example, somebody can shoot me, are both available, and there's a retailer who's short on cash, he's going to go and buy Coke on credit and then use cash for something else. So that's the first thing. Your second question is that eventually a time is going to come where everybody is going to have credit. And then would it not become a playing field? No. The answer is that whoever is going to take out cash and introduce credit in their supply chains is going to walk away with so much data, new data, real-time data, that they'd be able to continuously create value propositions and new value on top of it versus the people that are coming from behind. So it's a race to digitize your supply chains. And the biggest what hook or a precursor to behavior change in digitizing supply chains is the promise of credit across the supply chains. You know, if you go talk to your retailers and your distributors and your suppliers and you tell them, guys, you know, we are getting rid of cash in our supply chains, and guess what? As you digitize these supply chains for us, we're going to give you credit. And not just credit, but we may give you subsidized credit. Because if you give them subsidized credit, behavior changes faster, and suddenly you're operating a supply chain which is completely digitized. And that is the advantage that you want to be. So whoever gets there first will develop all the ancillary capabilities.
Really interesting point. Not only you want to be the one to give it, you also want to be the first one to get into that. So that's where so just a minute from digressing from this conversation, I'm going to ask something to our jurors out there. We are in about last 2 minutes of our voting system, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, both. So, make use of this time. I think we have a few jurors who still have to vote. I believe my team has still got the voting open for last 2 minutes, right? So please make sure that you sign in your mobile phones on the app, Gauge. Vote for your top 3 ideas, and we will be announcing the results soon. So that's for all of you, but I'm back here. Qasif, in your introduction, I mentioned and I spoke about, so I'm going to try and make it now that you have given a case for a lot of us to look into, but I also want to talk about the process of innovation and generally looking at progressing in this new world, yeah? So I mentioned that there are 2 kinds of innovation that happen. One is the technology that comes in, right? And you focus on that. The second is the use cases of how you are going to change once the technology is there. Yours is an example, or this new inflection points that you're talking about are an example of using that technology to change the world. Because, a certain point had reached, the burning platforms were already there. We had behavioral change. We had technology available around us. And it's a matter of time, whoever is the first one to make a use case out of that. So how do you look at innovation? I mean, one is a strategic decision for the leadership team over here, how to go about that. But then there are hundreds and thousands, literally 5,000 potentially people watching us right now from these 11 countries. In our daily lives, how can we open ourselves to innovation?
Great question. Look, I mean, innovation, and this is a considered Finja view, and, we've experienced it now, that innovation always happens bottom up. Okay. Innovation has to be culturally anchored, and it would come to people that are closest to the problem. Innovation is seldom top down, okay? So what I'm trying to say is that you got to go out and operate non-hierarchical organizations where whoever is closest to the problem raises their hand and says, this is a better way to fix that problem, right? Because they have the first-hand view of what the market wants. And then it goes bottom up. And innovation has to be culturally anchored, meaning that one play that happened in another geography may not work anywhere. So, I mean, the innovation does not happen in boardrooms. Innovation does not come from C-level executives anymore. Innovation comes by putting your ear to the ground and listening to the people that are going out and meeting the customers. Innovation will come from people like you who spend hours and hours and hours and hours in the field where the rubber is hitting the road. And if the organization develops the empathy to hear those people and create confidence around what they're saying, and then empowering them to go out and run multiple pilots and build a tolerance for failure, then from those pilots real breakthrough innovation will come. Innovation will never come in the 2022 and beyond from top down. That era is bygone.
The voting time? All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, the voting time. I'm so sorry, Qasif. There is something happening in parallel as well. Just to give you a little background of that, we had 11 countries who came up with innovation ideas. Each country had its own little competition. Top 1 or 2 ideas are selected. Today, we are celebrating all those ideas within the CCI globe. So, it's absolutely the bottom up.
That's the way to do it.
So we have seen presentations here where sales teams, where supply teams, where manufacturing teams, all of them have come up with these ideas. And, sometimes it is surprised that these digital ideas are coming from people who are not so digital.
Yeah.
And and we see how those are being executed right now as well. So Qasif, your multiple, you mentioned about that the banks, the general perception or one of the perceptions is that the banks are going to be no longer, I would say relevant. But as you said, that it's just the form that is going to be changed. Now, if that form needs to be changed from the banking side, the big elephants they are as institutions, do you think they are ready to accept that change? Will their organize as institutions, will they be able to cope up with the change?
Yeah, again, a great question. Look, I mean, the thing is that the banks are realizing that they need to morph into platforms now, meaning that they don't have to be vertically siloed anymore, right? Because earlier the bank was doing everything, and nobody is good at everything, right? If you're going to conceive a product, you're going to build a product, you're going to distribute that product, you're going to market that product, you're going to service that product, you're going to build the tech leg of that product. That means that you're trying to do everything yourself. Now we've arrived at a world where you only do the piece that you're super good in a horizontal way, and all the other pieces you stack over it. So the banks have understood, or at least the banks that will survive and change the world have understood, that they'll open themselves as a platform. And on top of that, they will have a multitude of new age fintechs play. And together, they create the new value proposition for the users. For example, imagine if Coke, which is an incumbent and a 9,000 pound gorilla, has to deal with another gorilla, which is the bank. It'll be messy. We all know that do execution. But if on top of that gorilla, the banking gorilla, you have a nimble fintech, and that becomes the front through which these two gorillas are interacting. So the banks are realizing that, right? And the banks have some real assets. And some of them is like a shitload of capital. They have licenses, they have trust, they have so many things. And if they have many fintechs playing on top, it's exactly like the iPhone had lots of apps through the iStore, or Android had the Android store, right? But the BlackBerry tried to do it themselves. They're not around. The Microsoft guys tried to do their thing. They're not around. The Nokia guys are not. So the banks that don't understand that they would have to have multiple new age players playing on top, use their strengths, and then together create new value, will go into oblivion. But it's not rocket science anymore. It was in 2008-9 when the smartphones came in, maybe in the early, but now I think most people understand this.
So, this is so fascinating that I can go on and on and on, and I will keep you for just a few more minutes. So this is no longer David versus Goliath. This is David and Goliath
Absolutely.
partnering together
Absolutely.
and making this happen.
Yes,
because this is how it seems.
Yes. Clearly, there is, because the strengths that these players have are very different, right? What is it that the fintechs can do? They're like a jet ski. They can go out and create products very quickly, and they can create great experiences in selected segments. That's pretty much what the fintechs do, right? And they're more fun to work at than the banks,
that's an
right?
employer branding right there.
No,
Anybody who watches watching. No, just kidding.
truly,
And I also love the fact that you
Yeah.
were carrying a Finja bottle.
Yeah.
That was one of the first things I
Yeah.
looked at. I mean, that's kind of a romancing the brand
Yeah.
that's there. So
Yeah.
brilliant. Love it.
But the banks have things, which are very powerful,
Okay.
right? Like capital, licenses, trust, relationships, and so on, right? So, I mean, it's about marrying the two. I mean, it's not about. I mean, David didn't want to fight Goliath.
Yeah.
He
was put in a situation.
he was put in a situation, right? And now the Goliaths are realizing that they desperately need the Davids, and that's why HBL and Finja partnership and so many partnerships that the fintechs and the banks are doing, right? And they're setting trends. Real leadership in banks are going to go out and embrace fintechs. The problem with banks is that for the last 500 years, they've never created any meaningful partnerships because they did everything on their own. So all they were good at was making vendor relationships. These are not vendor relationships. These are real partner relationships, although your partner is like a dragonfly and you are an elephant. But you got to treat your partner as equal. And a lot of banks have problem doing that, but the real leaders and the real banks are treating their fintechs as their equals. And I'm happy to report that the kind of partnership that we run with the largest commercial bank in Pakistan, we have a seat on the table, and our voice is as strong as theirs, and they're treating us like their true partner and not like a vendor.
And Kasif, just to address to everybody who's watching this may sound like a deep dive into financial innovation and banks versus fintech. But what Kasif is talking about each of your million plus outlets which are there in any country, and it is empowering those individuals, those business owners. So the end result is that customer being empowered by the synergy of the banks and the fintech. So the innovation is going to happen at an inflection point, as you said, at one time or the other. The point is whether we are ready to make sure of that. So as we think about innovation, as we think about the tomorrow, this is a picture that has been painted right in front of us.
Yeah, I'd like to say one thing.
Please.
Is this the COVID black swan has changed everything. Today, when you go to a retailer and there are 2 million of those or a million of those in Pakistan, all of them are so familiar and comfortable with using apps because COVID made that happen. Right? They're calling Uber, Kareem, they're ordering on those apps, they're using those apps to check weather, health, so many things. So digital literacy and their ability to operate these apps have tremendously grown, right? Same is the case with distributors. The distributors are really wary today of these new age players like, the aggregators. There are so many of them in Pakistan, right? And because of which they want to embrace. So the actors in your supply chain, their behaviors have already changed. They all have smartphones. It's connected to the internet. They all know how to operate apps. They're all so much more technology savvy than before. That's what COVID has done. And now there are fintech and banks that have partnered together. And all you got to do is that introduce them into your supply chain mix and get rid of cash and credit and be the first ones to do it.
So, Kasif, now this brings me to my final question with you. And I can go on and on and on. I love that. I mean, in these 45 minutes or so, the amount of knowledge, the information, and probably, the way you have made everybody think about things, I mean, that's absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
So thank you for that. But, this change is happening now for once in our lifetimes, simultaneously in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is no clear winner who's already done that, as if I was to look at it, right? It's happening in every one of those 11 countries CCI operates in. It's happening in the rest of the world. So do you see that there is a win to be had there as well to be amongst the first, or do you see that this model has already had tremendous success in some of the countries from which we can learn?
Look, I mean, one of the greatest advantages of a network company like Coke is that you have brilliant people, working in different geographies and trying different things. And because right now we are talking about digitizing supply chain, so I think what happens in a place and it scales, there's a very, very good case to study that and then try and replicate it in your own culture, but with the understanding that all of these changes would have to be culturally anchored. So you got to be smart to be able to pick success from one part and quickly mold it to what would work for you. But it is much better position to be in to go out and study what is failing or what is succeeding and then play the game rather than just be in one
So it is safe to say that the world right now is going through from burning platforms to inflection points.
Clearly.
So we don't have a clear inflection point or a pilot out there. So any one of us could be amongst the first ones to play with this.
Absolutely.
and to lead that.
Yeah, and do your pilots and don't bring ego to it. And if the pilots fail, celebrate that failure, learn from it, do other ones. But you got to have many hats in the ring, and cap your downside and see which ones are going to rise. But I think I keep going back to your finance director and say that if you don't transform and digitize faster than anyone else, then the other option is a burning platform, is liquidation. So this has to be the number one agenda for a market share leader like Coke. And hearing some of your senior people, I think it already is.
Wonderful. Qasif, I don't have to repeat that, but it has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Qasif Shahid.
Thank you.
Whoa, that was a lot of inspiration right there in that, bundled together in that 1 hour, ladies and gentlemen. This was the kind of passion we needed towards the end of the day to underscore why innovation is needed and how it has the potential of changing lives.